The night before the wedding, the church was decorated, the guests had arrived, and the bride was counting down to the happiest day of her life. But by sunrise, her groom lay cold in a pool of blood, murdered in the church basement. And the man behind it? Her father. Her beloved pastor father. And his reason? A secret desire, a rejected proposal, and a deadly obsession. Sometimes the people we trust the most, those who preach love, forgiveness, and grace, hide the darkest secrets. Behind the pulpit and polished sermons, behind the rehearsed smiles and rehearsed blessings, lies the unbearable weight of unfulfilled lust, concealed identities, and sins that no confession can cleanse. This story isn't about love gone wrong, it's about power abused, truth denied, and a deadly silence. Before we dive into this chilling story of betrayal, secrets, and cold-blooded murder, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and turn on your notification bell so you never miss another true crime case that makes your jaw drop. If you enjoy deep dive stories like this, give us a like and share with a fellow true crime fan. Let's begin. If you had walked into Grace Dominion Temple on any given Sunday, you'd have seen a congregation in full awe of one man, Pastor Ronald Benson. He didn't just preach. He commanded. He didn't just lead. He inspired. And for the people of Westwood Hills, he wasn't just a pastor, he was the voice of God. A tall, broad-shouldered man in his early 50s, with a deep baritone voice and calm, deliberate movements, Ronald had a way of making you feel seen. He'd stop in the middle of a sermon, look directly into your eyes from the pulpit, and say something like, "God told me someone here is battling a secret temptation. You can let it go now. You're safe here." And you'd believe him. People worshipped the ground he walked on. After all, he'd built the church from scratch, bought the land, raised the funds, laid the bricks. He baptized babies who later became choir leaders. He officiated weddings, buried elders, and anointed youth. He was a widower, too. His wife, Felicia Benson, died 6 years ago from breast cancer. The town grieved with him. But rather than fall apart, Ronald rose higher, becoming almost angelic in the eyes of his followers. And he raised their only child, Layla, alone. Devotedly. Layla was everything her mother had been, beautiful, graceful, soft-spoken, and utterly radiant. She was 25, a university graduate, and served as youth coordinator for the church. If Pastor Benson was the pulpit, Layla was the pew, the place people felt safe. And when Layla introduced her boyfriend to the congregation, the reaction was electric. His name was Victor Hale, a 27-year-old architect who designed faith-based eco-buildings. The two had met at a youth conference in Maryland, and Victor was everything a father could want for his daughter: smart, respectful, God-fearing. At least, that's what everyone thought. From the outside, this was a fairy tale unfolding. Pastor Benson even said one Sunday, "Some men get lucky. But I've been blessed. My daughter is marrying a man after God's heart." There was clapping. Whistles. Even a few tears in the front row. Plans for the wedding began. Invitations were printed. Fittings were scheduled. And everyone in Westwood Hills marked August 12th on their calendars, the day Layla Benson would marry the love of her life. But behind the polished sermons and pristine vestments, something was brewing. Victor had started arriving late to services. He sat farther from Pastor Benson during church meetings. And one evening, at the annual church barbecue, someone noticed that Pastor Benson refused to shake Victor's hand. Just a few seconds of tension. Brushed off. Ignored. Forgotten. But for those who were paying attention, that moment was like a crack in stained glass, almost invisible at first glance, but waiting to shatter. Little did anyone know. This wasn't just a wedding countdown. It was a ticking time bomb. Victor had always been a calm man. He didn't believe in dramatics. He believed in structure, routine, and respectful silence. But ever since his engagement to Layla, his instincts had started to itch, softly at first, then louder, sharper. Something about Pastor Benson didn't sit right with him. Not just as a soon-to-be father-in-law, but as a man. One Thursday evening, just 3 weeks before the wedding, Pastor Benson asked Victor to stop by the parsonage after choir practice. It wasn't a strange request. He'd often pulled young men aside for spiritual guidance. Victor arrived at 8:13 p.m. The house was quiet. The study door was already open, warm light spilling from inside. It smelled of cologne, aged wood, and faint cigar smoke. An odd scent for a man who preached against all forms of worldly indulgence. Ronald sat behind his desk, a half-finished journal in front of him, the Bible open to the book of Proverbs. "Sit, Victor," he said without looking up. Victor obeyed, uneasy. Pastor Benson looked up and smiled. "Too slowly. Too long. I've been watching you," he began. "You've been handling things well. Layla's a strong girl. Her mother would have liked you." "Thank you, sir," Victor said. "But I wonder," Benson leaned forward, folding his fingers. "Do you really know what you're stepping into?" Victor furrowed his brows. "Sir? You're marrying the daughter of a man who built this community. People look up to me. They look up to her. And by extension, they'll look up to you. That's a lot of pressure. A lot of attention." Victor nodded slowly. "I'm aware of the expectations. I'll carry them with honor." Benson chuckled. "Honor is a word. I'm talking about truth." A silence settled. Then Ronald stood and walked around the desk, too close, too slow. "You're a handsome man, Victor," he said, voice lower. "Clean. Disciplined. Calm. Not like the other boys who came sniffing around my daughter. You've got something else." Victor shifted. "Sir, I'm not sure I understand." "You don't have to understand," Benson said, stopping just behind him. "You just have to be open." A hand fell on Victor's shoulder. Firm. Heavy. Unwelcome. Victor rose abruptly. "Pastor, I think I should go." Benson didn't flinch. He only stared, dark eyes gleaming under the dim lamp. "You can pretend to misunderstand me," he said softly. "But men like us? We know when there's something there. A spark. A current." Victor backed away slowly, confused and angry. "Respectfully, I came here thinking this was about the wedding. About Layla." Benson's face changed. Cold. Silent. Then he smiled again, more mask than meaning. "I only wanted to see if your foundation was strong. That's all." Victor left without another word. But that night, he couldn't sleep. He didn't tell Layla what happened, not because he didn't trust her, but because he didn't want to hurt her. She adored her father. And no matter how disturbing that conversation had been, it felt unreal. Like a bad dream that followed him into the daylight. Still, something had shifted. The next Sunday, Victor skipped service for the first time since joining Grace Dominion Temple. He told Layla he had a headache. The truth? He couldn't sit in that sanctuary, under that man's gaze, with those words echoing in his head. "You've got something else." He needed time. But time was not his ally. On Tuesday, he got another message from Pastor Benson. A short one. "Stop by tomorrow. We should talk again." This time, without the nerves. Victor never replied. But the message stayed on his phone, proof of something he wasn't ready to face. And for the first time in their 2-year relationship, he pulled slightly away from Layla. Not out of resentment, but out of protection. She noticed. "You're quiet these days," she said gently, brushing his hair off his forehead. I'm just tired, he whispered. A lot on my mind. She kissed him. Well, in 3 weeks, we'll be married. And everything will be perfect. Victor smiled. But deep inside, something cracked. Because perfect was now a word that belonged to the past. By the second week before the wedding, things no longer felt like a celebration. The flowers were paid for. The seating chart was complete. The vows had been written. But Victor Hale couldn't shake the weight pressing down on his chest. Something was wrong. Something deeply wrong. And it wasn't about the wedding. It was about Ronald Benson. Since their last encounter in the pastor's study, Victor had tried everything to forget. To chalk it up to a misunderstanding. To pretend it didn't make his skin crawl every time he remembered that whisper, "You just have to be open." But how do you forget when the man you're supposed to call Dad starts looking at you like prey? Victor distanced himself. Subtly. He skipped one-on-one meetings. He let Layla handle wedding arrangements with her father. And when Pastor Benson texted him again, "We can't avoid the inevitable. Meet me soon." Victor didn't answer. But Pastor Benson wasn't used to being ignored. It was a Thursday evening. Victor was walking Layla to her car after midweek service. The church parking lot was quiet. Warm. Almost peaceful. Then Pastor Benson stepped out from the side entrance, closing the metal door behind him with slow precision. He smiled, his eyes fixed only on Victor. "Son," he said. "A word?" Layla kissed Victor's cheek. "I'll call you when I get home." She had no idea what was brewing between the two men she loved most. As she drove off, Victor turned reluctantly. "Yes, sir." Ronald looked around. "Not here. Walk with me." They strolled toward the back of the church. The air was thick with silence, only broken by the chirping of distant crickets and the low hum of nearby street lamps. Then Ronald spoke. "You've been avoiding me." Victor didn't deny it. "I've been busy." "I warned you," Ronald said quietly, "that this union came with pressure. But I didn't realize you were the type to run from pressure." Victor's jaw clenched. "With all due respect, sir, I'm not running. I'm trying to protect my peace. And Layla's." Pastor Benson stopped walking. "Peace," he echoed. "You think ignoring me brings peace?" Victor finally turned to him fully. His voice firm, clear. "You're crossing boundaries that shouldn't be crossed. You know it. I know it. I haven't told Layla out of respect for her. But if this continues..." Benson stepped closer, voice low and sharp. "You'll do what? Expose me? Ruin her wedding? Break her heart?" Victor didn't move. "You don't scare me," he said. Ronald smiled, a hollow, joyless smile. "I don't have to scare you. You already know what I'm capable of. The problem is, you don't understand what we had." "We never had anything," Victor snapped. "You're her father. And if you cared about her even slightly, you'd back off and let her be happy." For a second, Ronald just stared at him. Then his eyes turned, glassy. "You think I wanted this?" he whispered. "You think I asked for these feelings? I buried them. For years. I devoted my life to God. To the ministry. To my daughter. But when you walked into my life, it was like something inside me woke up." Victor was stunned. Sickened. "Then put it back to sleep," he said, voice trembling now with disgust. "Because whatever woke up in you is not love. It's obsession." He turned and walked away. This time, Ronald didn't follow. But as Victor reached his car, his phone vibrated. A text. From an unknown number. "You're making a mistake. You don't know what I'll do when I have nothing left to lose." Victor's fingers froze. His eyes scanned the parking lot. Nothing. Just shadows. Just silence. That night, Victor didn't sleep. Not because he was afraid for himself, but because he realized, for the first time, that Layla might not know the man her father really was. And that scared him more than anything. The wedding was just 1 week away. A Saturday ceremony. Gold and cream themed. Over 200 guests expected. The reception would be held in the Grace Dominion Fellowship Hall, with enough catering to feed a small army. The choir had rehearsed their harmonies. The bridesmaids had picked up their dresses. The program booklet featured a smiling photo of Layla and Victor, hand in hand, captioned, "Two souls. One destiny. God's perfect plan." But destiny had already taken a detour. And God? He'd been silent for weeks. On the night of the wedding rehearsal, things began falling apart, quietly at first, then all at once. Layla stood radiant at the center of the sanctuary, surrounded by bridesmaids and groomsmen. Victor was beside her, wearing a polite smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. His mind was elsewhere, far from the altar, far from the pulpit, and dangerously close to the secrets that had begun rotting the core of everything. He hadn't told Layla about the latest text. Or the one before it. Or the way Pastor Benson had begun to watch him from across the room, not like a father proud of his son-in-law, but like a predator waiting for a moment of weakness. Victor didn't feel like a groom. He felt like bait. As they rehearsed the processional walk, Pastor Benson stood near the front pews, arms folded. He was supposed to be beaming. Instead, he looked rigid. Hollow. His eyes locked on Victor the entire time. Again, Ronald said, when the group finished a full run-through. Layla laughed softly. "Dad, we've done it 3 times." He didn't smile. "Then you should be perfect at it." Victor glanced at Layla. She rolled her eyes in amusement. But Victor felt a wave of unease settle into his stomach. After the final run-through, the rehearsal dinner was held downstairs in the church's event hall. Laughter filled the room, and the smell of baked chicken, rice, and steamed vegetables lingered in the air. Victor sat beside Layla, quietly picking at his food. Across the table, Ronald lifted a glass for a toast. "To Victor," he said. "May you always be the man you pretend to be." The room went silent for a beat too long. Layla blinked. "Dad?" Ronald laughed it off. "Just a joke." But Victor knew better. That wasn't a joke. That was a warning. As people began to leave, Victor pulled Layla aside. "Can we talk?" he asked. She smiled. "Of course, babe. What's wrong?" He hesitated. "How do you tell a woman her father propositioned you? How do you confess that the man officiating your wedding wants you for himself?" Victor opened his mouth. But before he could speak, they were interrupted. "Victor," Pastor Benson's voice called out, too calmly. "Could I have a moment? Alone?" Layla looked between them. "It's okay," Victor said gently. "I'll meet you outside." She nodded and walked toward her car. Victor followed Ronald back into the sanctuary. The room was dark, only the faint glow of the baptismal candles lighting the altar. The 2 men stood in silence. "You're making a mistake," Ronald said first. Victor crossed his arms. "You've said that before. Is this the part where you threaten me again? I'm trying to save you." "From what? A good life? A happy marriage?" Ronald's voice cracked. "From yourself." Victor's patience snapped. "No. What you're trying to do is manipulate me. Control me. Maybe even replace something you lost. I don't know what twisted logic you've told yourself, but I'm not yours. I never was." He turned to leave. Ronald's voice dropped to a whisper. If you marry her, you'll never be free. Victor froze. Is that a threat? No, Pastor Benson said. It's a promise. Victor didn't look back. He walked out of the church, into the night, into the arms of the woman waiting in the car, still unaware that the man she adored was unraveling right before her eyes. That night, Victor typed a message in his phone. I think we need to postpone the wedding. I have to tell you something. About your father. But he never hit send. Because he didn't know how. And somewhere deep down, he feared she wouldn't believe him. It was supposed to be the final peaceful night before a lifetime of memories began. Layla was upstairs at her childhood home, carefully steaming her wedding gown. Her bridesmaids were in the guest rooms, laughing, playing soft music, doing face masks. Everything was perfect. At least on the surface. Downstairs, the house was quiet. Too quiet. Victor Hale, meanwhile, was alone in his apartment. No music. No TV. Just the creak of the ceiling fan and the deafening silence that settled over him like a wool blanket. The weight of the last few weeks, the texts, the looks, the threats, had pressed into his chest so long that he didn't even know what normal felt like anymore. He stared at his phone. Layla's contact stared back. Tell her. She deserves to know. But every time he tried, his heart stalled. Would she believe him? Or would she turn on him, convinced that he was trying to destroy her family hours before the altar? It wasn't just fear. It was love. Misplaced. Misguided. But real. At 10:47 p.m., his phone buzzed. A new text. From Pastor Benson. One last talk. Tonight. Before you ruin everything. Victor's blood went cold. He shouldn't go. He knew he shouldn't go. But he also knew something else. If he didn't face Ronald now, this would never stop. The man wouldn't let him live in peace. He wouldn't let Layla breathe without control. And maybe confronting him would be the only way to protect her. Victor grabbed his jacket. And drove. The church was dimly lit when he arrived. The main hall was dark, but a soft light glowed from beneath the sanctuary door. The door to the basement was slightly ajar. Victor stepped inside. The air was musty. Stale. Almost suffocating. He descended the stairs slowly. The basement was filled with old hymnals, stage props, folding chairs, and the smell of damp wood. In the corner, a single bulb flickered overhead. And beneath it, standing like a shadow between salvation and ruin, was Pastor Ronald Benson. Still wearing his collar. Still pretending to be holy. I didn't think you'd come, he said, voice almost tender. Victor stood still. This ends tonight. Ronald nodded. It does. A pause. Then Ronald stepped forward. Victor, there's a version of this where we both walk away free. Where you and I reach an understanding. Where you don't marry Layla. Where we figure something out. Victor's eyes blazed. You're sick. No, Ronald said firmly. I'm real. I stopped lying to myself. Why can't you do the same? Because I'm not like you, Victor hissed. I don't manipulate people in God's name. I don't chase shadows and call it love. Ronald stepped closer. Too close. I saw it in your eyes that night in my study, he said. You felt something. You still do. You're just afraid. Of them. Of her. Of how much you want to be seen. Victor shoved him back. Enough. But Ronald wasn't finished. You can lie to yourself, Victor. But not to me. I will expose you, I'll tell everybody what you are. You are no man of God. You are just a predator, a pretender, a manipulator, and the devil himself. I wish Layla didn't have you as a father because you don't deserve her. Layla and everybody will hear of who you truly are tonight." Victor turned to walk away. And that's when it happened. The flash of metal. The crash of something heavy. Then pain. What exactly happened in those seconds can only be reconstructed by forensic reports and blood splatter. Victor turned his back. Ronald struck him, once, with a brass cross yanked from the wall shelf. It split Victor's scalp, dazed him, but he turned and fought. There was a scuffle. Chairs overturned. Victor tried to crawl toward the stairs. Another blow. And then another. And then. Silence. At 11:38 p.m., Ronald Benson stood over Victor's lifeless body. His hands were shaking. Blood soaked the sleeves of his white clerical shirt. He whispered something, no one would ever know what, and then dropped the cross beside the corpse. He didn't call anyone. He didn't weep. He just stood there. For a very long time. At exactly 12:04 a.m., Layla tried calling Victor. No answer. She texted. "You okay, babe? Can't believe tomorrow's the big day." She waited. No response. She had no idea that while she laid her gown out carefully across the bedspread upstairs, her groom was lying dead in the basement of the church where they were supposed to say, "I do." The morning was supposed to begin with flowers and vows. Instead, it began with silence. By 9 a.m., guests had started to arrive at Grace Dominion Temple. The choir rehearsed. Ushers adjusted seating. But Victor Hale, the groom, was nowhere to be found. Layla sat in her dressing room, her white gown draped over a hanger. She smiled at her reflection, waiting for a phone call that never came. At 9:23 a.m., a church assistant was sent to the basement for spare candles. He returned screaming. Victor's lifeless body was found sprawled on the concrete floor, head bloodied, knuckles bruised. A shattered brass cross lay beside him. Clutched in his hand was a torn scrap of white fabric, part of a clergy collar. Pastor Ronald Benson was calm when the police arrived. But he didn't explain the blood on his shirt sleeves, found hidden in a trash bin in his office. He didn't speak when they uncovered the church security feed's final audio clip. "I told you not to reject me. I gave you a way out." Ronald was arrested at 10:06 a.m. Layla was still in her robe when officers told her the truth. Her fiancé had been murdered, by her father. She collapsed. In his confession, Ronald simply said, "He left me no choice. If I couldn't have him, no one could." He was charged with first-degree murder and sentenced to life without parole. The wedding never happened. The church shut down within the month. And Layla? She left town quietly, never to return. Some say she still wears her engagement ring. Others say she buried it with Victor. Either way, one thing remains true. The man she trusted to walk her down the aisle was the same man who buried the groom. Trust can be a beautiful thing, until it's given to the wrong person. Layla Benson lost not only the man she loved but the father she thought she knew. Behind the robe and collar was a heart consumed by obsession, and a hand capable of murder. What would you have done if you were Victor? Should he have told Layla sooner, or walked away completely? If this story shook you, hit that like button and subscribe for more jaw-dropping true crime stories. Drop your thoughts in the comments, let's talk about it. Until next time, stay safe, stay sharp, and trust carefully.